Yeah, well, the thing is, whatever it is that makes us feel anxious or
Uh-huh.
fearful, we need to change our relationship with fear.
Right.
So if we speak to the fear and embrace it,
Yeah.
it tends to dissolve. If you hold your hands out and try to ward it off, you empower the fear.
Right. Right.
So it's
Right.
changing your relationship with fear.
Right.
As you
Right.
said, it's there. At times it's sensible, but what's my relationship with it?
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. It's Audley Stevenson, and I'm back for another edition of the most audacious podcast on the internet. I promise you, you will not find another one more audacious than this one. As always, I thank you for being part of our journey as we continue our ongoing goal of helping you live your best audacious life ever. As always, I encourage you to connect with us through our social media channels. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram under the handle The Audacious Pod. And then if you head over to Facebook and type in The Audacious Living Podcast in your search engine, you will locate us there as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, then you know that you can subscribe to our YouTube channel by tapping on the bell down below. So lots of great ways to stay connected to us, and I encourage you to like, follow, subscribe, share, even tell a friend. And that's what we'll continue to do our part to keep this audacious conversation going. Now, we're going to talk about possibilities on this episode of the Audacious Living Podcast, and more specifically, the things that we can do in our day-to-day lives to increase our ability to increase our potential and attain more possibilities. And I'll explain a little bit further, because the big thing to understand is that new and exciting possibilities are always within our reach. And oftentimes, the thing that prevents us from getting there and attaining them is less about what we can't do and more about the things that we allow to hold us back. Things such as fear, uncertainty, and self-doubt. As long as we allow these things to stand in our way, it's virtually impossible to achieve greater things. And this is where Mel Schwartz comes in. He's a psychotherapist, a marriage counselor, a speaker, and the author of 3 books, including his latest, The Possibility Principle. And again, when we talk about fear and self-doubt and uncertainty, these things exist. And much of Mel's work revolves around how we can develop a mastery of the way we think of things and how we attack these preventers from possibilities, if you will. If we can shift our mindset, it can help build our resilience, embrace uncertainty, while helping us to overcome anxiety, depression that much quicker. The reality is these things are going to exist in our lives, but what we think about them are the key. So, this is a great conversation that I had with Mel on this topic. It's very empowering and enlightening, and I am certain that all of you will walk away feeling that much more inspired. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Mel Schwartz. Enjoy. Mel, thanks you for joining me today on the Audacious Living Podcast. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today.
Audley, great to meet you, and I just love the word audacious.
Yes, I it's funny. I'll tell you, it's something that I sort of just landed on. started the podcast sort of in the height of the pandemic, and I was looking for something to renew my energy, renew my strength, if you will. And I'd done podcasts in the past, so I knew I wanted to do a podcast, but I didn't know what it wanted to be about. And I sort of did a bit of a deep dive into sort of things that were important to me and things that mattered to me. And the one reoccurring theme that when I look back at myself, I said every sort of major, whether call it success or victory or milestone, came on the strength of me showing some level of audaciousness. And the theme was there. The word just kind of fell into place. And oftentimes people say, "Hey, is it a play on your name?" And it's just, you know what, pure happenstance, and I'll take, and I'm happy with it. So there we go. That's the backstory.
Audacious. That's a synonym for fearless, right?
Yeah.
So it's fearlessness.
Yeah. Well,
and people don't often understand fearless doesn't mean no fear. Right. It means less fear.
Got you. Well, and a big part of it is recognizing that the fear exists. I think for a lot of people, it's like, they want to stay away from it. They want to act like it's not there, as opposed to, acknowledging its existence, but not making it take up a whole lot of space in your life. Is that
Yeah, well, the thing is, whatever it is that makes us feel anxious or fearful, we need to change our relationship with fear.
Right.
So if we speak to the fear and embrace it, it tends to dissolve. If you hold your hands out and try to ward it off, you empower the fear.
Right.
So it's changing your relationship with fear.
Right.
As you said, it's there. At times it's sensible, but what's my relationship with it?
Got you. And that's a really good point, because the last thing you want to do, or the thing we should do, is let fear hold us back from trying or attempting or reaching or demonstrating the boldness, demonstrating the audacity that we all have inside of us.
And what holds us back? Fear of how others will see us, what we think others will think of us. Some people have a fear of failure. I hate the word failure. It's really what they're saying is they have a fear of not succeeding. Well, that's okay. But failure, what is failure? Watch a toddler take their first steps and then fall down. Did the baby fail? No, it just didn't learn to walk yet. We need to treat ourselves the same way.
Yeah. It's very much an approach, a mind, and I know we'll get into this, but how we view things. And I think that you can apply that to a lot of things, whether it's failure, change, new possibilities, all about how we think about it.
It's a matter of perception and how we perceive reality to operate.
Good point. So let's talk about possibilities. I know it's something that it's something that you love and you spend a lot of time talking about. And your book, The Possibilities Principle, which I had a chance to look at, and I think you've done a really good job of breaking down sort of the, I guess, myths, if you will, because there's sort of a fair amount of myths as to why we can't achieve, or at least why we tell ourselves we can't achieve, isn't it?
Well, the whole thing is like we've been operating from a really poor failure of a game plan for life. So I can't say it more simply. Our game plan of how we think we should live, which is handed down to us generation by generation. I'm new to Instagram. I have a following now, a considerable following. It's called Uncommon Sense.
Okay.
I introduce uncommon sense because common sense ain't working out. Okay, that's why we're in the mess we're in. So this game plan for living, some examples. In my work as a psychotherapist, I see that the core human struggle is self-esteem, authentic, genuine self-worth. Very few people have authentic self-esteem. Why? The messages we're given, like show no weakness, act strong. Acting strong is acting, so it's weak. So I kind of paradoxically reverse that. I say, if I can share my insecurity, my doubt, my vulnerability, if I share it, it means I'm no longer setting you up as my judge. I'm cool with me. That's how you get authentic self-worth. Communication. We get into this battle of right and wrong, winner and loser. Well, if I need to be right, that means you need to be wrong. How's that going to work out? So what I do is I reorganize a game plan for life. So in the possibility principle, I kind of reached the quantum physics.
Okay.
Now, I was not a good science student,
Okay.
so nobody be impressed by this.
I was going to ask you about that, Mel.
No, man, I was bad in science and math.
Okay.
Maybe at best I could do would be a C- in science.
Okay.
You know what, Audley? I'm going to tell the story about what brought me there.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. I'm about 41 years old.
Okay.
And I'm living the life I think I should be living. I live in a suburb north of New York City, north of Manhattan, Westchester County. I'm married and I have 2 young sons, and I'm in business and doing pretty well. Purchased and built a really great house, got a big mortgage, and I'm living the life. And as I'm driving from the city home after work one day, I have an epiphany.
Okay.
It's, I'm making money, but I don't have deep fulfillment and meaning and purpose in what I'm doing. In case anyone's curious, what am I doing? I'm designing and manufacturing women's clothing.
Okay.
By the time I get home, I tell my wife, who then becomes my former wife, I say to her, I think I want to close the business. And she's very alarmed. What are you going to do? I said, I don't know, but I was just so excited, like a kid the night before their birthday party, because I was thinking all these possibilities. And I remembered that years before, I had told somebody that I love to help people think differently, to get insight. So I thought, what would that look like? Well, by the morning I had it. I'd apply to graduate school, get a degree, practice psychotherapy, write books, give talks. Right. So let's fast forward now, 3 years later.
Okay.
I've gotten divorced.
Okay.
I'm raising my 2 young sons on my own. And I go out for a bike ride. Beautiful spring day, thinking everything's good. Yep. And I begin to have some fearful thoughts, oddly. Like, how am I ever going to make enough money doing this to support my kids? How do I establish a successful therapy practice? Am I ever going to meet a woman I'm interested in again? Will I be lonely? Anxiety percolated, and even maybe a little panic attack. I turn the bike around and ride back to my house.
Okay.
And I absentmindedly reach for a book on the bookshelf, which is called The Turning Point.
Okay.
Written by Fritjof Capra, a quantum physicist.
Okay.
I start to read. And within a couple of pages, I had no more anxiety. And in fact, I was intrigued. Intrigued isn't a strong enough word. So what was I reading? That reality is not the way we were taught and schooled. We have been operating from 17th century science, Newton and Descartes, that reality is like a giant machine or a clock, and we're just the parts in the clock, and everything is deterministic, predictable. Give you enough data, you can calculate the future. Now, I realized on my bike ride, what triggered my anxiety? Uncertainty about the future. Okay, now hold that for a moment. I begin to read that reality is not Newton's reality of predictability. Reality in quantum physics is absolute uncertainty. So a light bulb goes off. Why does uncertainty have to be bad? Uncertainty equals new possibilities. What if I embrace the uncertainty and navigate it? Insight number 1. Insight number 2, I read that reality is actually inseparable. It's one, just like the Eastern mystics said, oneness, one universe. It's one inseparable whole. So I thought, wow, that means I'm not alone.
Right.
And I'm connected. I have meaning and purpose because everything I say and think and do is part of the ripple of everything. And I had some insights as to how that could help people in relationships. It brings empathy and compassion.
Yes, it does.
Having to win. So I begin to think, well, if it's doing this for me, and I'm reading now dozens and dozens of philosophy books and quantum physics books, not psychology. So after a while, I begin to practice, and selectively, I begin to use some of these methods with some of my clients, and I find astounding results. So in particular, my approach to anxiety, I employ this quantum paradigm.
Okay.
Which is simple. If I embrace uncertainty, then my thought isn't attaching to fear. Right. Usually anxiety is my thought attaches to fear. What if, in a negative way?
Yes.
Right. So I ended up giving a TEDx talk, Breaking Free from Anxiety.
Right.
Which just shares how you accomplish this. Now, in our culture, you ask doctors and psychologists about anxiety, they have a belief. The best you can do is manage it or medicate it. Not true.
Right.
Not true.
Right.
I found that in my work, I teach people to see their fearful thought and be able to say, it's just a thought.
Right.
I don't have to become that thought.
Right.
And it works. It just works. So the principles of the possibility principle are embrace uncertainty and invite in inseparability. And that helps us in every aspect of our lives.
Absolutely. Well, Mel, there's a part of this where people, in part of people's mind, they want to have control. They want to plan. They want to know what's coming around the corner. And so to let that all go, right? We're now saying, let that go and accept the uncertainty. That's a challenge for people.
It is, but it simply requires thinking differently. Here's an example. I recall many years ago working with a woman who was very unhappily married.
Okay.
Now, probably her late 40s, 50, and they had no children. She and her husband had done marital counseling, nothing there. They had no shared interests, no feelings for each other, and they were financially independent.
Okay.
So there was no money concerns. So I asked her, then why are you staying married? Now, here was her answer. Because I don't know who I would be if I were divorced. The fear of the future. Who would I be? So on the spot, I created a visualization. I said, picture yourself at the bank of a river with me. And let's think metaphorically, the river is the flow of life.
Yes.
Now I want you to walk into the river and let go and let the current take you. Her eyes are closed. I let a minute or two pass. I said, where are you now? She said, I got into the river and the current was taking me, but I grabbed a hold of this big boulder. I said, why? She said, because I can't see where the river goes up ahead. It's bending to the right. I said, that's the future. Right. Now, you let go, you can navigate, oddly. You can stroke to one side or the other, but you have to get in the flow. Now, I said to her, by the way, up ahead to the right where you can't see, that's who you would be as a divorced woman. But you need to know in advance, instead of saying, I don't know how it would be, but I know I won't be imprisoned in this bad marriage. Right. So it does require shifting. And it's not theoretical. I work with people to actually master their thoughts, which frees you up to do this. But of course we plan. Right. And that makes sense. I'm not suggesting we don't need to know what time to pick up the kids from school or when the train comes. Right. But when we live life as though we're playing a chess match, you sit back and calculate, if I make this move, what will happen? You're not in the flow. Right. And I posted recently on Instagram in a video, you cannot be in fear and in flow at the same time. Right, right. Because, so to be audacious, you need to be in flow. That's right. That's exactly it. But flow is the word. Acceptance of, and acceptance is the other piece that I've heard you essentially describe, the importance of accepting the flow of life and that it can take you. And that what we want to develop is resilience. Beautiful word. Yes. I'm going to fall down. I'm going to walk into walls. Can I develop the resilience to bounce back and move forward? Well, it goes back to the earlier conversation we had about failure. Is that truly a failure because you fall down? Well, no, it's in some respects, I would view it as an opportunity to either learn, try, or do something differently. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think it is. Absolutely. So, so my work, you know, I'm not a young man, but I'm so passionate about this because it's a second career and I don't follow any of the rules. If someone says, Mel, what's your therapeutic approach? I go, oh boy, we go. Do you really want to know? If you got 20 minutes, nothing they taught me in graduate school that I believed or I follow, because they're teaching therapy based upon 17th century science.
Got you.
And it's that way of thinking that creates an epidemic of fear, anxiety, depression. Let's just look at depression for a moment.
Yeah.
We get so clinical and medical about these things, and we shouldn't be. I could say to you, sometimes depression makes sense. That's what I call situational depression. So very often, a marriage breaks up, there isn't enough money to go around, you can't see a future, you feel depressed. That person shouldn't be medicated for clinical depression. Their circumstances are depressing, right? But as a culture, depression also happens by becoming addicted to certainty and predictability. And there's also a terrible loss of wonder and curiosity as a value.
Yeah.
So I've never worked with anyone.
And those two, they're exciting things. Curiosity and wonder. That's where the fun is. That's where the enjoyment is.
Right. So, but think about the word wonderful. There was a time when wonderful meant something full of wonder.
Yeah.
Like, wow, look at that rainbow. That's wonderful.
Yes.
Now, kid comes home from school, a great report card, you say, that's wonderful. Wonderful isn't full of wonder anymore. It's job well done, productive. The loss of wonder, the loss of curiosity impacts us terribly and results in failed relationships and in depression. We don't wonder because we always are searching for the right answer. You know what? Answers don't matter. Questions are more important. Because questions direct where our attention goes.
Yes.
Right? Einstein asked great questions.
Yep.
Right? When I'm being interviewed, if I'm asked a question that I've never heard or been asked before,
to
me, that's a great question.
Yes.
Usually when you watch TV or radio and someone says, that's a great question, that means they have a ready answer for it.
Yes.
That's ridiculous.
Right.
I want to be asked things I've never been asked. So I wonder.
Oh, yeah, it's a form of challenging, right? Challenging yourself, challenging your beliefs, challenging your knowledge. And I think those are important things to do, even from just a growth standpoint, Mel. Like we should be challenged.
Absolutely. But challenging and having curiosity is great. But a lot of people tip over, based on fear, into overanalyzing. Now, overanalyzing sometimes is part and parcel of anxiety.
Yes.
So in other words, it's like putting your eyes to a microscope and never lifting them up. You're getting smaller and smaller pieces of reality. You can't see what you're doing. So people suffer sometimes as a new term, analysis paralysis, or paralysis analysis, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that's because they're fearful of making a mistake. Now, what's a mistake?
Right.
A mistake is taking a snapshot of a moment in time, looking back at it and saying, I would have done it differently, knowing what I know now. Right. But that's life, that's flow and process. It's not a mistake. And if you're afraid to make mistakes, you're not living and you're not learning.
Yeah. No, well, those are, we can't limit ourselves, because to know what the answer is going to be all the time is, I think we're robbing ourselves, Mel, a little bit. I would say that we're of the living, the flowing, getting rid of the uncertainty just makes it boring. It's not as fun.
Absolutely. That's why when you get to a certain age, time passes more quickly.
Yeah.
Because you're doing the same thing over and over. One of the ways I learned about this is one of the first articles I wrote was called Who Am I?
Okay.
And years later, I Google it and I see my article and see it has like 700,000 views. People Google, who am I? Now, in that article, and in my podcast of the same title, I say, it's the wrong question to ask. Who am I is prompting that there is a specific, fixed, inert answer. You've been reduced to something.
Right.
That's Newtonian science. I said, instead, here's the question to ask. How would I like to experience my life? How would I like to experience myself? That's growing and evolving and forward moving.
Yeah.
So another way I look at that is it's shifting from being to becoming.
Right.
Becoming's in the flow. Who am I? That's a stuck being.
Yeah. There's no growth. It's just planted like a tree, and that's all it is.
Right. That's right. So, so look, I stumbled on a way whereby every day I get excited by some new thinking, curiosity.
Yeah.
I got a note and say, what if this and what if that? And all of a sudden, I guess that makes me creative, something I never thought of that way, and we can all be that way.
Sure.
In different things, and not having the same discussion with the same person.
Right.
So last week, hadn't seen my two closest friends because of COVID for some time.
Right.
I meet these guys for lunch.
Yep.
Anywhere from 70 to 79 years old.
Okay.
We sit down and I say, guys, let's not talk about sports, politics, or family, because that's where we'd usually go.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about any of that. And they kind of look at me, and these are really smart guys, and they know me. And they say, where are you going, Mel? I said, I don't want to repeat the same old discussions. Let's get real. And they say, okay, what do you want to talk about? I said, you guys ever think about death? What comes up? Do you feel like you're on a shorter runway? What are your fears? One of my friends, the one 79, was, challenged by it. All three of us were, but I thought, I think about it. Do my friends talk about it?
Sure.
Let's open up and talk to each other. That's embracing the fear. Why hide from each other?
Right.
You see, that's it. We hide from each other. No good.
Yep. No, I hear that. And it's actually, I think those are some really good questions that you talked about, questioning things, right? I think those questions can also go inwards as well. Why do we fear the things that we fear? Why do we believe the things that we believe? And I was going to touch on limiting beliefs a little bit, because I know that's another big piece, but I actually want to go back to something you said earlier with respects to your viewpoint and how you do things differently than, than what's taught, if you will. How much of that, Mel, is just your life experiences coming into the profession in this new second career at the stage of life that you had with all these experiences behind you? How much of that feeds into what you do now?
Well, I'm sure it does. So when I was in graduate school, many of the professors were my age, and they said they were teaching a holistic approach to psychology, but they weren't. They didn't understand the word holistic, and so I would challenge them and take it on. But I've always been a bit of a rebel. Yeah. I was an anti-war activist during the Vietnam War.
Okay.
I've always been challenging what is. So yes, that influences me a lot. But what really excites my learning, oddly, I would read a book from a great philosopher, but someone who's not well known, Alfred North Whitehead.
Okay.
And I'd read about a concept, a very complex concept that intrigues me. Then I would read a book from a quantum physicist about another phenomenon, which is incredible. And I take these two pieces and I say, if this is true and that's true, how do they relate? And that for me was like an alchemy. That allowed me to develop my own approach. Because if I were just, as a therapist, doing what I was trained to do, I wouldn't be a therapist anymore.
Right.
That would have no passion.
Right.
For me. So every day in every session, I learn something new, because I choose to be present instead of having the answers in advance.
Got you.
When I'm in a session, I'm not thinking.
Right.
I'm present, and I try to be intuitively aware and present, and I trust it comes. And that's how I think we need to learn to navigate life. Now, going back to the belief systems, what gets in our way of change? Well, one, there's a belief it's hard to change, which is, you believe it, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
And then I'll say, anybody ever teach you how to change? Do you learn it in school? Your parents teach you? No. Well, it wasn't easy to learn how to read but we were taught how.
Exactly.
Now, so in terms of the change process, we develop certain core beliefs about ourselves and other people and things based upon childhood experiences.
Yes.
Generations later, decades later, I meant to say, we don't see it as a belief. We see it as the truth. So here's an example. Years ago, I'm giving a talk at an historical society on the change process.
Okay. Yep.
Individual in the audience, older man stands up. You could tell from his tone, he wasn't buying what I was pitching. People don't change. So I said to him, so you think people don't change? He said, that's right. I said, how did you come to that belief? See, I switched the truth to a belief. So he shares a story about his childhood, his family of origin. I said, oh, so imagine if you grew up as my brother in my family and had my experiences, you believe that change is accessible. He shrugs his shoulders and he says, I guess so. I said, so we have different beliefs because we've had different experiences. Now we're talking. And you know what? Everywhere in the world, in marriages, in friendships, in politics, if we stop fighting what's right and wrong and true and share my belief, how did I come to my belief, then we act in a human way.
Right, right. Well, Mel, what we're doing is first off, we're accepting one another for who we are. I'm not trying to change you to make you come on my side and vice versa. It's accepting the fact that, yes, you've had some experiences, I have some experiences, and they inform, what we are today. And that's why we get in these battles of right and wrong. I think those are the wrong conversations to be having, because it's not, my beliefs aren't wrong and neither are yours.
No, beliefs are neither right nor wrong. It's like saying, if you're in a room with me and I say, it's hot in here, I make an objective statement, it is hot in here. You could say, no, it isn't. But if I say, I feel hot, oddly, you can't tell me I don't feel hot. So going back to communications, and particularly in what starts off as a romantic relationship.
Yep.
And we know what happens most often.
Sure. Down
the road. It's because it breaks down into not expressing feelings, but making objective statements about right or wrong and saying, you are, I am not, yes, you are. The way I try to break through when I do couples counseling is to say, leave the objective statements aside. Share how you feel. And then if the other person invalidates you or refutes you, you say, time out. Do you love me? Yes, I love you. Well, you can't say you love me if you don't care how I feel. We need to start communicating with each other around how we feel.
Yeah.
Not just arguing the truth of what is.
Right, right. Because we can argue the truth of what is, but in the grand scheme of things, how important is that? So now I've got you to convince, I've convinced you that I'm right. Then what?
Well, again, if you're right, I'm wrong. Most people don't have an ego that allows them to be comfortable being wrong. Now, going back to reading, before the pandemic, I had a big office with a whole library of books behind me.
Yep.
And sometimes people would look up at the books and they say, do you read all those books? I said, well, not start to finish. But when I read, I would only buy books that I don't understand or that confuse me, because I embrace confusion. Because that means I'm going to let it percolate, and at some point in the future, I'll have an insight. So we have to change our relationship with confusion and not knowing, and do that in our communications, to be curious. Like she says to her husband, you don't know how to be intimate. Instead of him defending himself, he needs to say, I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. What do you mean by this word intimate? There has to be a curiosity for real dialogue. Yeah. We don't get that.
Yeah. I think a part of that too, a big part of the dialogue is listening. And I think oftentimes we discount the significance or the importance of listening. So it's not listening for the purposes of answering your question or answering your statement. It's listening for the purpose of understanding what you're saying.
And to truly understand.
Yeah.
We need to be asking questions, because the words have different actual meanings personally for each of us. There's something I share in my book, The Possibility Principle, called shared meaning. Like that story about you're not intimate. Yes, I am. Shared meanings. Tell me what the word means to you. That slows down the ping pong match and the back and the forth, and it creates dialogue. And the other thing is to talk subjectively. I feel, I think, I want to know how you feel. If we were taught emotional intelligence in school as kids, alongside with history, English, and math, we'd be living in a different world.
Yeah.
That's what my new book is about. My new book, which I'm working on, is called Uncommon Sense.
Yeah.
And every day on Instagram, I put up a 60-second video dealing with all these things that we're talking about, right? Don't act strong. That's weak.
Yes.
Share your vulnerability. That's strong.
Yeah.
Right? Or would you rather be right, or would you rather be happy? Everyone says I'd rather be happy, but they go immediately into the need to be right.
Yeah.
And, so there are core principles in the way we live that get in our way of living well.
Got you.
That's my theme.
Yeah, no, and I get it, and it makes total sense, and I love the way, Mel, that you break it down in that manner in which you're questioning. Like, so for example, right or happy, which one do you prefer? And are your actions pointing you in the direction where you want to go, which is another big one. Like, are you being consistent with the things that you say you want and the things that you're actually doing?
Yes. And in the epilogue of my book, the last 2 pages, after I've taken the reader through science and philosophy and relationships and thought, I end with 2 simple pages. And I say, why do some people succeed with change and others don't? 2 words: willful intention. Sometimes we all have insights, but we don't do anything and the insight fades. So driving home that day from work all that time ago when I thought I want a new career, I turned my insight into what I call a defining moment.
Okay.
Defining moment means I am on a new path now because of that insight. So to make it all come to fruition, willful intention means I have an intention. That's not enough. I need willfulness, determination. So you think of willful intention as like the wind in the sail of a sailboat, right? So for everybody listening or watching, if you want to get past feeling frustrated, you have to set willfulness, willful intention, which is I'm not going to let anything get in my way. I'm going to make this work. I'm going to overcome my anxiety. I'm going to overcome my shyness. I'm going to stop complaining that I'm not earning enough money, and I'm going to find a way to do it.
Right.
We have to change our relationships with our thoughts. Now,
I like that. The relationship with, I really like that a lot because.
This is going to sound egocentric because I'm quoting myself, but oddly, in my book, I write the most important relationship you will ever have is not with your parents, your children, your partner, your lover. The relationship that will impact you far more than any other is with your thoughts. They are your constant companion. You need to turn your thoughts into your ally. And that's it. That is the nucleus. That's the center of the whole thing. I'm out of victimhood.
I think so things like I oftentimes joke and say, give yourself self high fives and pat yourself on the back and these sorts of encouraging types of thoughts and behaviors, because if it starts with this expression of thoughts become things, right? If those are thoughts that we begin with, then we display it through our actions, doesn't it, Mel?
No, there's no distinction between your thought and your feeling and your action, right? They are as one. Now, I don't mean that we should be falsely praising ourselves.
Sure.
We shouldn't be harshly critical. There's a middle ground where we can tune in and evaluate and make adjustments.
Yes. Well, no, and that is a fine line, because we oftentimes are our own biggest critic. I mean, we talk about languages, and you'll hear I'm so dumb or I'm so stupid or why that, you hear people say these things, and it's as long as we continue to beat ourselves up like that, we are doing damage, I would say.
And those are probably a repeating of words that they may have heard as a kid from one of their parents or a friend or a teacher. There's a replication. That's the old belief system still at play.
Yeah. I've heard you oftentimes talk about getting from here to there. And I think that's an interesting, first of all, it's an interesting expression because it shows that there's a journey of sorts, if you will. I wonder if you sort of expand on it a bit further, get listeners understand, what that really means.
Well, I mean, first we'd have to describe there, whatever there may be. So for me, it's not just simply like a visualization. I have no issue with spiritual traditions.
Okay.
But like a new age approach never worked for me because it's oversimplified. So getting from here to there would suggest that if I can envision what there is, then I have to consider in what way are there going to be obstacles that are not external to me? They are my own obstacles.
Yes.
Fear, self-doubt, insecurity. What are the obstacles that would get in my way? I wrote an article which was called What If?
Okay.
And in it, I suggest what if could be a positive wondering. What if I closed my business, went to graduate school and found a new career? Positive. There could have been the critical what if. What if I won't be able to earn a living? What if I won't get any patients? Right? So what if, think to yourself if the what if is positive or fearful, and then you see how you're setting it up. So that goes back to getting from here to there. There can be achieved if we don't let fear get in the way.
Yeah.
And where does the fear come from? Our experiences and our beliefs.
Yeah, that's right.
That's all. So you don't have to limit yourself to your experiences and understand that your beliefs are just that. Right. They're beliefs.
Yeah, that's right. Again, those self-limiting beliefs will do just that. They will limit us. They will hold us back. They will convince us that we're not worthy.
So here is an important trick.
Okay.
It's not a trick. It's an approach.
Okay.
If you have a self-limiting belief, just give me one, Audley. Make it up.
I'm afraid of juggling because I'm not good enough to juggle.
Okay. I am afraid of juggling.
Okay.
Now let's look at am. Am is a to be verb.
Okay.
There are 8 to be verbs. Is, am, be, were, was. Now, you know what's different about to be verbs and all other verbs? All other verbs show movement and action. The to be verbs are all fixed and inert and stuck. So the last chapter of my book is about removing to be verbs. I can't be in flow and avoiding fear when I use to be verbs, and they speak about objective truth. So I'm teaching this exercise one evening to a group of people, and I ask people about their core beliefs, and some young man says, his core belief about himself, he says, I am nothing. I am empty. Wow. Now I ask him to say it without using the to be verb. And he says, I feel empty. I feel like nothing, but his face lightened up. I said, what's going on? He said, well, I feel that way. I've always felt that way. It doesn't mean I always have to feel that way. There's possibility.
That's it.
So when we struggle in a communication with someone else or in our belief with ourselves, look for the to be verb because it gets you stuck.
Yeah.
Remove it. I wrote an entire chapter in my book without using a to be verb.
Wow.
And that gives us ownership.
Yeah.
See, because then we remove those verbs. We're not separate with an objective reality out there.
Yep.
I am participating in creating that reality.
Yeah. Mel, you're touching on something that I think is profound, in that, the language that we use and how we describe ourselves. So we talked about the thoughts earlier, but now it's our language that also can contribute to where we're at.
Well, let me tell you, you are right on target, because when I am asked people sometimes say, so Mel, why are we still living according to 17th century philosophy instead of 19th, instead of 20th and 21st quantum physics? And they say, because our language, the to be verbs, keep us anchored in Newton's 17th century science. They are words that speak about a fixed objective reality and separation. Quantum physics is interconnectivity and subjective reality. It's those to be verbs that ruin relationships, create conflict, keep change so distant, because our thoughts are comprised of words.
Yes, that's right.
So watch the to be verbs.
Yeah. This is, when this conversation is long and done, I'm going to, when I reflect on it, again, the possibilities piece and all the things that influence our possibilities are something that will ring true in my mind. And it clearly, as we're dialoguing, I'm realizing that there's a lot of little subtle things that we're doing to ourselves that we're not even aware of, and whether they've been inbred in us as young children growing up, past experiences, fears, all these things are contributing to why we potentially are limiting ourselves.
Well, there's a chapter early in my book which explains how we lose our possibilities and potential. I've got a few minutes left. I'll explain it to you. In quantum physics, light exists in two different forms. Light exists as a wave, and a wave in quantum physics is the equivalent of pure potential.
Okay.
So as wave, it's pure potential, but when you observe the wave literally collapses and becomes a particle, a fixed thing. That's called a wave collapse. So I thought, something similar happens to us in our lives. We come into life in a state of full potential. Leave aside DNA, leave aside past life experience, if you believe in that. We're in the state of pure potential. Our personality isn't shaped or formed. And then sometime in childhood, either through one acute moment in time or chronic messages, our potential, our possibilities collapses like a wave collapse. And that's when we come to think of ourselves as, I'm a loser, I'm a failure, I'll never. How did that happen? Well, it may have been one sentence from a teacher or a parent, or we may have heard it every day. Now, decades later, we're carrying this belief around with ourselves and we haven't shed it. And that's why we struggle with change. One last thought on this. I wrote, but it's in my book and I have a podcast on it. It's called When Coping Mechanisms Grow Old. Now, in childhood, we are adaptive and we develop coping mechanisms to deal with stressors. Someone has an alcoholic, angry parent, they may become a people pleaser so that they're not pissing anyone off. So that is adaptive as a kid. But decades and decades later, they're still a people pleaser. That coping mechanism grows old and it becomes like a suit of armor that you carry around with you. So everybody, look at your old coping mechanisms that we developed in childhood and ask yourself, do I really need this anymore? Does it benefit me?
And I think for some people, they may not even know that's a coping mechanism. It's just how they are. And you'll hear people say, that's just the way I am, right? I like to please people, right?
You're absolutely right. There it is. That's the way I am. Well, you got to be that way for a reason.
That's right.
For reasons. And so take a look at those limiting beliefs. Ask yourself, how did I come to them?
That's right.
And how do I know it's true?
That's right. And the other part about that is, okay, but there's nothing that says that you have to stay that way. Okay. And I think that's a good, again, when we talk about challenging who we are and our thoughts and our behaviors, that those are types of questions that we should be asking.
Look, I know firsthand how we can change. Prior to that defining moment, am I starting to read philosophy and quantum physics? I was an average student at best. Regular guy. I didn't have these kind of conversations or thoughts. And at 40 and 42 years old, a whole new world opens up to me. So I know firsthand that we are not limited and pigeonholed.
Yes.
We can open to and access whatever we choose. Just need to put the wind in the sail.
That's it. Well, or in your case, get on your bike and get the breeze
Get
coming.
on the bike and have a good anxiety attack, and then learn from that.
That's right.
Help people overcome anxiety.
That's right. That's exactly it. But again, however we get there, Mel, as long as we get there, right?
That's absolutely right.
Oh, very nice. Listen, so first off, this is such an awesome chat, and I'm so glad that we had an opportunity to do this. This has been phenomenal. For our listeners, if they want to learn more about you or your podcast, your fellow podcaster, or even grab a copy of your book, where can we send them? How can we connect them?
Okay, my website. It's my name, MELSCHWARTZ.com. You can access my podcast, my articles on Instagram. It's Mel Schwartz 7. And breaking out in January, I'm teaching Zoom courses.
Amazing.
On this, the first one is how to overcome anxiety. And all that information will be up there.
Good. Well, that I think, judging on this conversation, which really just scratched the surface. So to know that we can go deeper is awesome. So I encourage your listeners to check it out. Mel, like I said, this has been great. Thank you for doing this. Really insightful. And again, I'm a big fan of just your delivery. It's really clear. It's straightforward, and it hits home. So thank you, and thanks for being here, and all the best.
And great philosophy and great attitude and great energy you have, Audley. Great to meet you.
Great. Well, thank you. And all the best, Mel.
Thanks.
Back we are here on the podcast, and I first off need to thank Mel so much for being here with me on the Audacious Living podcast and sharing such powerful insights. It's clear through your work that you want as many people as possible to reach the highest peak they possibly can. And it all starts with making that mental shift in our mind and adjusting the way we see things and perceive things in our heads. And once those internal conversations are far more positive, it will open up all kinds of possibilities. And, Mel left us with so much to think about. But if there's just one thing that I take from my conversation with him, it would be this. The way we act, feel, and behave are oftentimes directly connected to the internal conversations we have with ourselves. If our self-talk is filled with doubt and harsh criticism and these catastrophic predictions that we have, our lives will be reflective of the same. Now, if we reinforce our thinking with positive affirmations, we exercise grace, and regularly practice patience with ourselves when we slip up, our lives will also be reflective of this. When we accept that the negative emotions that are tied to fear and uncertainty are a normal reality of life, they tend to have less impact over us. When we change our relationship with fear and embrace it instead of pushing it away, it tends to dissolve and therefore opens us up to new possibilities and potentials. And that's audacious. Hey, listen, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, please know that you can do so simply by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com and enter in your email address, and you'll be alerted every time we've got brand new content that comes out. We've reached the end of another episode of the Audacious Living podcast, and I got to send a big thanks and shout out to our amazing supporters and all those lovers of audaciousness. It's your encouragement, your positive messages that offers such a tremendous encouragement and support, and so much appreciated, and that's what keeps us going. So I thank you for doing so. As we rapidly approach the Christmas season, and we certainly know what's happening with the virus and in cases that are increasing, I would encourage you, as I do with every episode, is to stay safe, be kind, and show love to one another. Be audacious, y'all.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, Be audacious.